Welcome to the South Burlington Development Review Board of May 7th, 2024. My name is Dawn Philibert. I'm the chair of the board, and I'd like to introduce the other members of the board. Stephanie Wyman, Charlie Johnston, John Moscatelli, Frank Kochman, Mark Baer, Quinn Mann, and our staff, Marty Gillies and Marla Keene. This meeting is being recorded, and there are a number of ways to participate. You can participate in person as you have, or you can participate online. And if you do so, please include your contact information in the chat to document that you're a participant in tonight's meeting. If you're here in person, please sign the sign-in sheet out back to document that you are a participant in the meeting should you ever want to take future action. And if you're on the phone, please send your contact information via email to mkeene, Keene, at southburlingtonvt.gov. Okay. Emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency, there are two doors in the two corners of the room, and you would simply exit those and turn right or left, and you would be outside. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items? Okay. Are there any announcements or reminders? Okay. Are there any comments and questions from the public that are not related to the agenda? Okay, we have a long agenda ahead of us, so we're going to dive in. We'll start with agenda item number 5. Site plan application SP 2410 and conditional use application CU 2404 of Heritage Automobile Sales, Inc. to amend a previously approved approximately 40-acre master plan for 551 residential units in housing types ranging from duplex to mixed-use multifamily, a 110-room hotel, a 22,500 square foot restaurant, medical office building, a 3,500 square foot restaurant with a drive-through, a 21,380 square foot mixed-use commercial building, and approximately 5 acres of programmed and passive open spaces. The amendment consists of using 82 parking spots in the existing parking area to the south of the 21,380 square foot commercial building as commercial parking for new and used vehicle inventory for an off-site auto dealer at 17 Real Road. Is anyone recused or have a conflict to disclose?
Yep, I'm recused.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else? Okay. Who is here for the applicant?
Greg Dixon from Krebs & Lansing Consulting Engineers.
Greg. Anyone else on your team here?
I don't think anybody is here right now, and I'm not sure if anybody's online.
Okay. Let's swear you in. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, thank you. All right. You've been before us before, I believe. So do you have any comments to offer before we dive into the staff report?
Yeah, I know we read our normal spiel from the master plan that we were here for the past couple of months upon. This project is an attempt to use sort of an existing infrastructure. In the meantime, well, we're still planning the project as a way for the...
Bring your mic closer, please, so we can hear you.
As a way for the property owner to make some income on that land while it's not currently being used.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that's it. I'd be happy to take questions and go through the report.
Okay, let's do that. Let's see. The first question on page 6 is about the time limits. I have a question for you, Marla. The line that says, "and consider whether to impose any temporal limits on the proposed use." I know what temporal limits means, but I wasn't sure. Are we suggesting that they have to have time limits?
I'll let
was
Marty take this one. This is one that Marty reviewed.
Okay, thank you. Marty, go ahead.
I don't think that you have to have time limits.
Okay.
It's just a suggestion, a recommendation of staff
Okay.
based on a couple things that we'll probably talk about.
Board, what are your thoughts?
I think that given the present use as a vacant lot, I don't see a reason to limit it until such time as the master plan phasing plan triggers the construction that will render the site obsolete. It's, and it seems to be an adequate use for a vacant lot.
Sure.
I know there's conditions later in the decision that discuss limiting impacts, but I think with those in place, I'm fine with pretty much putting it as the master plan limitation.
I agree with you. Any other comments?
What's the surface of the lot now? Is it a hard surface or not?
Yes, it's paved. It's paved, yes.
Paved,
lot for
okay.
Yeah.
the movie theater.
Other comments?
Yeah, so I guess to that point, I don't disagree that maybe doing it based on phasing makes more sense than based on a number of months or number of years. We were looking at the plans, and so on the plan sheet sent to us, it shows where the parking is going to be in green, and some of that parking is over the edge of the property line on what is technically real road. Oh, you're doing the side by side. Wow. So it looks like there's maybe 8.
it didn't work. I thought I could rotate.
Oh, there's like 8 parking spaces.
And is Real Road part of phase one?
I'll ask Greg. Yeah.
So it is and it isn't. I mean, I think we've gone through sort of the phasing, the actual construction of real roads like sidewalks and street trees and the development of the bike path would probably be more in phase 2, as you can kind of see from the yellow. Right now, we were mostly just trying to limit it to that parking lot, which just happens to overlap the property line at the current moment. Again, one, we could limit and not use those parking spaces, but that was kind of I'm sort of outlining what our intent was originally. But
Does that make sense, what's being talked about here to everyone? I couldn't get them to rotate the same way.
Yeah, Marla, can you go down one more sheet on like the phasing plan? Because it has a better breakout of like where phase 1 converts to phase 2, and I think that would help everybody.
yeah, if you go up in the top left-hand corner of that. So as you can see in phase 1 of the construction plan, we are calling out that parking area will be used to offset parking that is offset during construction of buildings 2 and 7. Our conversations with Heritage and the project are basically if the need becomes apparent that is needed for either construction or parking, the agreement would sort of stop at that point. Is how we've discussed it. So.
Thank you. Frank, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Number 2, this is a question about the impact on traffic. Greg, what are your thoughts?
So I outlined this briefly in the letter that I wrote to the board. The existing movie theater had 70 p.m. peak hour trips. I think when we discussed the creation of Elevation 802, which currently occupies this building, they were they're going to use 24, I think, is what we allocated for that. And so there is a remainder of about 46 p.m. parking spaces. Additionally, the Heritage has offered to not move vehicles during the peak hour, or to limit it to the extent practical. I think it behooves them to try not to move cars when everybody's on the road anyways. So they were more than willing to do that if the staff agrees.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
It's a nice condition to put in.
Yeah? Okay, ready to move on. Number 3, this refers back to number 1, the first comment, I think, about the time limits, if I'm understanding it correctly. Staff recommends the board's limits above take into consideration the necessary timeline by which the commercial parking use must be ceased to avoid conflict with the approved master plan. It sounds like we're settled on that.
I guess I would just ask for clarification. What do you, like, if you were going to write that condition, what do you think makes the most sense for you and for Heritage?
I believe we would condition it just stating sort of what I mentioned before, as it becomes apparent that the need for the parking lot is necessary to move forward with the master plan, then the parking agreement will be terminated. But if we need to be more,
Why couldn't you specifically say upon commencement of preliminary activity for phase 2, the parking arrangement with Heritage will be terminated?
we can definitely say during phase 2 for a hard deadline, but we might go into phase 1 if it's needed for phase 1, because there are parking offsets outlined in phase 1, that the parking lot could be needed in phase 1.
For staging, or something like that.
For staging, for offsetted parking, because building 2 and 7, I don't see a large need with the construction of those 2 buildings to have offsetted parking, but it definitely could be used for some parking for contractors, construction workers, such as that. But if we wanted to put a hard limit on it, we'll obviously start to need that 100% in phase 2 of the master plan.
I don't think we as a board care if you terminate the arrangement early, correct? No,
Right.
that's for you.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. From, as far as when, if they move forward with the project, they'll terminate it when they want to terminate it. I don't think it matters to us. I actually would kind of see it the opposite way. If for some reason the project falls through
I would-
and this becomes a permanent thing, do we care?
I was actually.
And I'm not sure that we do. So the only reason I would say putting a limit on it would just to cease it in case this plan as currently envisioned doesn't progress. So if we have a concern about that, I think that should be written in there. But as far as a hard, they'll figure out when they need the parking and tell them they need it back. That's a contractual issue.
I wonder if we as a board do want to require, like, at some point, a renewal. You know, what if for some reason, like, we can't control market conditions. We've seen it throughout the city over the years. Projects lag or slow down for market reasons, and so we have no idea what's going to happen. I'm wondering if like a 5-year sunset for a renewal is worthy in case we find that it's just not something that's fitting and it's not working out. I don't see a reason why, but I think you're right. We don't want to approve it as a permanent thing, but I think maybe a 5-year sunset for a renewal.
Or maybe 6, the master plan lasts 6 years, right? So if nothing happens, it
I
would
agree.
expire after 6, so.
Yeah, I would say that. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Yeah, at which point, if we want to continue this agreement, we'd come back in the board and ask for additional time.
Because if it becomes more of a permanent type of use, I think we'd want to throw a few more conditions on it or a few more improvements or something if it becomes more of a permanent fixture on that site.
Yep, I understand.
Okay.
So that's it for the staff comments. Board members, do you have any other questions or issues you'd like to raise? Charlie?
I want to go back to the parking plan for the rental, I guess, or heritage, right? There are 3 spots that are gonna be at the end of the existing Real Road. At the end of Phase 1, Real Road is supposed to be continued to Slip Road, so those 3 spots, I guess, are in conflict of the end of Phase 1. Vehicle continuation, right? I would recommend not having those 3 spots, right? Or not renting those out, or?
3 or 4. I mean, again, I would contend that we could sort of have that discussion personally with Heritage, and just say, hey, you're cut down from 82 to, or 83, I forget what the number is, to 78
Yeah,
or
it depends on when you
79.
decide to build the road, right?
Yeah.
Alright, yep.
But the whole intent and how the agreement is written is at which time the project is moving forward, the termination of whatever.
So Heritage knows that it's not a long-term, or it could be long-term, but they know that at a moment's notice, well, you'll give them a certain amount of notice, but
Yeah, I'm just pointing
There's
this out
nothing
because
locking-
that road continuation isn't really Phase 2, it's part of Phase 1. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be like an in-between.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? Thank you, Greg. I would entertain a motion to close this hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Se-
Anyone?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Stephanie, you're going to come back and join us now. Okay. Agenda item number 6. Master Plan Application MP 2401 of AAM Catamount Woods LLC to establish a master plan for an existing 87.6 acre lot developed with a parking lot, supporting driveways, and a helipad. The master plan consists of an estimated 275 units of housing and 2 5-story buildings over 2 phases and associated site improvements on 5.7 acres at 870 Williston Road. So, good evening.
Dawn,
Yes.
I will just mention that my wife has a position with medical school, and my son is going to be starting college at UVM in the fall, and I don't believe that'll have any impact on my ability to be impartial.
Okay, thank you. Any other recusals or conflicts, disclosures? No, okay, good. Let me swear, who is going to be testifying? How many people? Okay,
Pretty much the whole group.
all right. Right hands up, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Is there anyone online that I missed? Okay, you're all here in person, good. All right, we have a lot to cover tonight. You have 2 projects before us. One is a master plan, one is a preliminary plat. We have a policy that we end at 10 o'clock at night. So we try to allocate time for each project so that we have we have time for every project and don't run out and leave some applicants not heard. So we plan to spend the next hour on agenda item 6, and then we'll move on.
Sounds great to us.
Okay. So the first project, MP 2404, what would you, now, I apologize, I was not at the sketch plan when you presented it, so if I ask questions that seem kind of stupid, it's because I wasn't here to hear your sketch plan. But are there any comments you would like to make to us before we dive into the staff report?
Yes, I think it would, so I'm Tony Libro,
I'm sorry, we probably should get your names.
Since there's so many, you could have them introduce themselves the first time they speak.
Okay.
Tony, I don't think your mic is on.
oh. Let me pull it a little closer, how's that? Okay,
I know you can project, but we do have people online too.
I apologize, Marla. So I'm Tony Libro, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of AAM 15 Management. We own and operate the Doubletree Hotel and will be one of the owners and the manager of AAM Catamount Woods. So what we wanted to do was to introduce the project and introduce the master plan. I know this first session is for the continuation of the master plan and kind of take you through kind of where we are. And AAM, for my portion, is really only involved in one piece of the master plan, which is Catamount Woods. That consists of approximately 550 beds of student housing focused on UVM students who are in their 3rd and 4th years, and they would have already completed their residency requirements for on-campus housing. This is comprised of 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, which all would have an interior kitchen and their own washers and dryers. Each bedroom would be single occupant only, and each unit would have its own bathroom. The idea here is to provide multifamily housing.
Each unit or each bathroom? Excuse me.
Each apartment would have one bathroom,
Okay, even a 4-bedroom?
even a 4-bedroom.
Okay, wow.
We've got to share. The idea here is to provide housing that works with the students, that transitions them from residence hall living or dorm living to what they will find post-graduation. And so the idea here is that while they are technically on campus, they will be treated as though they are off campus. They will be signing leases with AAM, not with the university, although the university will be involved, not unlike the Redstone Apartments, with the determination of those leases. And it will be managed separately by AAM versus the university. So it'll be our maintenance team and our leasing team. As part of this, and we're going to go through all the different facets, and I thank everybody for all of your time here tonight. I know it's going to be a long 2 hours, but there's a lot of work that's gone in to try to make our applications as complete as possible, and we have met multiple times to go over all of your questions, staff questions, to make sure that we have answers to every one of those. But this is an important project not only for us, but also for the university. And for that, what I'd like to do is turn this over to Lisa Kingsbury from UVM.
Thanks, Tony. Can you all hear me?
May I ask a overview question?
Absolutely.
I gather the ownership entity is an LLC?
Yes, sir.
All right, and who are the participants of the LLC, and what are their percentage interest, and who is the controlling partner?
The controlling partner is AAM.
Okay.
And the participants in the actual ownership entity will be the University of Vermont and an AAM entity, which will be comprised of limited investors and then managers.
All right.
But the AAM entity would be have the controlling interest.
And will be essentially the managing member, is that correct?
That's correct.
And UVM's interest will be what percentage?
49%.
Okay, and you will, just trying to visualize, the other owner will be an entity created by AAM, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Which will have private market investors in that entity, right?
Yes, sir.
And it will have the majority vote on matters that go to the membership.
It would have the majority vote of matters that go to the membership, although the university will have a number of enumerated rights, which I'm sure that's a question that's probably best answered by UVM's counsel, who's with us this evening.
Okay.
But those agreements are in the process of being worked on right now by the legal teams.
And the day-to-day management will be with you.
The day-to-day management will be with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
I have another kind of general question. So if I'm a junior at UVM and my 2 best friends and I decide to share a 3-bedroom unit, will you have a lease agreement with each of the 3 of us or with one of us who sublets?
Yes, so the typical with student housing is each bed is leased separately. So in that particular case, you and your 2 friends, there would be 3 leases. You would sign the lease, and then you would have, unless you had enough resources to qualify on your own, there would be a guarantor involved.
Okay,
Which is also very typical of college student housing.
okay. It's called a parent.
Yeah. It's typically, yes.
Typically, yes.
Okay, all right. Let's move,
would you mind? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Do you mind?
Go ahead.
It's okay, thanks. So I'm Lisa Kingsbury. I'm the Associate Director of Planning at UVM. And I just want to thank you all for having us here this evening to talk about this important project. We all know there's an acute housing shortage in the region and the state. There's a lot of groups working on this, including here in South Burlington. Our students, our faculty, and staff are all feeling the pinch as well. And we're trying to work to do our part. Our Catamount Run project, which is, I'm not right next door. Am I pointing in the right direction? I think it's over there. We're very excited about that. It's a project that's in partnership with Snyder Braverman. It'll be opening its first buildings this summer. And we're grateful for South Burlington's support on that project and to the city administration and staff for all the guidance they've given us on making Catamount Woods a reality so far, and for all of your time. Just to build a little bit on what Tony just talked about and kind of the questions you're asking. So Catamount Woods will provide housing for UVM's upper class undergraduate students. And as Tony mentioned, at UVM we have a policy where students are required to live on campus in residence hall housing for 2 years as students, and once they've fulfilled that requirement, they can move wherever they would like to move. The majority of them do move off campus or into one of our other affiliated housing projects. Tony mentioned Redstone Lofts. We also have Redstone Commons. This project would function very much like that, where it's a project that is on campus, but to the student it feels independent. It's independent for the student. We don't have RAs there. They're leasing on their own. And we're hearing more and more from our students that they're interested in that type of housing. They want to stay on campus more than they have in years past. They're really interested in housing that's safe. It's near their classes and student services, and it has easy access to campus, either by bike, shuttle, or walking, which this project will have all of those things. So Catamount Woods will just provide another option for those students. And we really appreciate your review of the project so that we can open in summer 2026, which is our goal. So we understand from the staff comments and that there are questions about the applicability of 24 VSA 4413 that staff is recommending that we talk about tonight. Have you hear our arguments around that, specifically in terms of the primary educational use question. And we do have John Collins from UVM's General Counsel Office, and Andy Malcolm is over here, thank you, our outside counsel from Dindsey, that are here tonight to have that discussion with you all. So if it's acceptable to the board, we thought we would have that turn to Andy and have that discussion with you all first.
Is that the first staff comment? I haven't looked that far ahead.
The first staff comment relates
Is
to
about-
why is there a Phase 1A?
Okay.
Yeah,
Would it be all right if we kind of went in the order?
Yeah, I think that's okay, if that's what the board prefers. We just thought, because it seems to be an overarching question and because there are a number of comments within both packets that relate back to 4413, that it might be helpful to have that first. But if you would rather go in order, that's fine as well.
It's up to you.
What do you think, board? Anyone have a? Okay. Let's go through it in order, please. Okay. So number one, why is the stormwater upgrade a separate phase, 1A?
I'm Derek Reed. I'm with Krebs and Lansing Consulting Engineers. The stormwater pond to the west of the Doubletree site is actually part of a flow restoration plan improvement. Get the light on, must be.
It should be bright green.
There you go. All right. There you go. Okay. Sorry. The stormwater pond is actually a flow restoration improvement that will have UVM, South Burlington, Burlington, and VTrans. It really is not involved with this project at all. We thought we should show it because it's a master plan, but it is not. It's not treating the stormwater for this project. So I didn't know where to put it.
I see.
And I called it Phase 1A. It will be
Got it.
built in 2026 if all goes well and we use our grant funding in time.
So it's not taking flows from the master plan area. It's taking
No.
flows from the Doubletree, from the highway.
Not the Doubletree. It's taking UVM flows up above the from campus. There is a goal to take Staples flows, a large watershed, but not Doubletrees. Doubletrees flows will go to the pond, the gravel wetland conversion at the northeast corner of the site. We've done stormwater rerouting to make sure that the treatment for the project is locally on the site. And the pond upgrade will be done as part of the hotel addition project, which is a flow restoration, which is a form-based code project separately.
Questions?
Madam Chair, one of the things that complicates this project is that this is part of not only a master plan, but also there is a hotel addition project and structured parking project that are both in form-based code that and some of the comments we're going to talk through where it's been a little intermingled. And so certain items from staff comments where they're talking about connection to Williston Road and how does that all work, it's because it's flowing onto other parcels.
Right.
So just from a spatial perspective to be aware of.
It's clear to me that this is a complicated project. I drove through it the other day and thought, holy moly, it's like canyons and mesas and everything. It's a lot of wetlands and then you have the other parties. So this is a complicated, we will not get through this tonight, as I'm sure you know. But
I do, and actually, not only do I feel bad for all the professionals sitting to my left, my right, and behind me, but I also feel bad for Marla because she's been reviewing all three of the projects at once. So, kudos to all of you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions about the comment number 1 about Phase 1A? And can we live with this?
It might need to change in a paperwork way, but not in anything that matters to the board kind of way.
Okay.
But I mean that as a genuine might. I have to think about it.
I didn't know how to put it down,
Yeah.
so I agree.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, number 2, staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide a more simplified plat plan that shows only lots and easements and clarifies the area and layout of each of the 3 lots created by this project.
So we understand that comment, and we've worked on that, and we'll continue to work on that, but we've created 2 subdivision plats, an overall to cover the whole parcel, one that zooms in so you can actually read numbers, and then we also have an easement plan. We didn't have it prepared in time, but we have sort of forwarded it to staff after the comments, so I apologize.
Okay.
That was, hi, I'm Lonnie Raven. I work with UVM, and I'm part of the team for this project. And we did send something to staff, I believe yesterday, so there's a packet, and we can pick out which plan we'd like to show if you'd like to see what we prepared. And we know that staff has not had any time whatsoever to review it, but we do have something that we could show you if you choose.
Is that SP1 and SP2 for this?
Yeah, SP 101 and SP 1 of.
Or do you want to see it now or later?
I think this is more of,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think this is more of a housekeeping staff-related review item that we don't need to, I don't think the board is going to be, overweighing anything staff comments might have, so I just let them review it.
Okay.
Anybody object to that? No, okay.
I also just want to add one little thing. When we applied, we had 184 units, and now it's grown a tiny bit to 192.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. Staff comment 3 relates to the neighborhood meeting and our need, or the need, to have minutes from that meeting, and we're curious how the comments at the meeting were considered. And I'm curious myself, who were the 3 participants? I think I said. Were they store owners? I mean, who?
Yeah, I can.
Not the individuals, but the type of people.
Yeah,
Type of people,
I
right.
can address that. So first of all, I do have the notes. I will write them up. We also have a complete recording of the entire meeting, so we can forward that to you if you're interested. So we did have 3 participants. 2 were residents from Burlington,
Okay.
and 1 was a resident, just a resident of East Terrace. And because the crowd was so large, and everybody spoke as much as they wanted. The one resident from South Burlington did not say anything. We specifically asked him, would he like to say anything, and he declined. So we just gave him a lot of food.
Okay. Were the two homeowners from Burlington in favor of the project or opposed to it, or were they just learning?
They learned about the project and they were in favor.
Okay.
And in addition, outside of the requirement for this plan, we did go to Burlington and tell them about this project at an NPA meeting where there were a lot more than 3 people. I don't know how many, but there were a lot. And they generally were in favor of the project.
I'm not surprised, but okay.
Neither were we, yeah.
Any comments or questions from the board?
I guess my question or comment or more question was, who was noticed for this meeting to start the process? And was there any overlap with these neighborhood meetings you had that would, get people to this meeting if there was concerns?
Yeah, we sent out about 120 invitations, and we gave the names, the addresses, and the radius, where they are on a map to staff.
Yeah, which is standard. I was just wondering in terms of, I don't see, a room full of people here, so that maybe there are some from the neighborhood, but.
Well, honestly, there's not much of a neighborhood in South Burlington right around the project.
Yeah.
So if you cross Williston Road and you go down East Avenue, there are neighbors there. Those are the closest South Burlington neighbors. If you go across the interstate, you're on Williston Road. It's not a big residential area. So if you go down Dorset Street, you do get to residents, but I guess they didn't. We didn't. They're already so far away that we did not notice them. We did notice people all the way down halfway down East Avenue.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Number 4, did we skip one? Was that 3?
Wait, I can go now. Whatever you
Nope.
need.
We're moving on to 4. I'm going to read this. Staff recommends the board include a condition that no new development areas may be established within the land included in the present master plan for the duration of the initial master plan and extensions thereof. The purpose of this recommendation is to circumvent a one lot at a time approach to the master plan. My question is, how is that different from any master plan? And that's a question for staff. But then we'd like to hear your response.
So it would be helpful if you could pull up the first page of the plans. I know it takes a minute to load, but this is the one that shows sort of everything. The master plan area has the phases that are all sort of at the bottom. One's outlined in pink, one's outlined in blue. And then the red boundary on this plan is the entirety of the master plan.
Red boundary, okay.
So this comment is saying that since there's no development program shown outside of the phase 1 and phase 2, the master plan should say no new development areas can be added to this master plan for the duration of the master plan. That's the recommendation of this comment.
And how long does the master plan last?
6 years with the option to extend to 10 for cause.
Okay,
The university agrees to that condition.
okay. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Thank you.
I guess it's not clear to me why the area of the master plan is so extensive when the development area is, compared to the boundary, is so small. I'm missing a beat here.
That's the size of the lot. The lot is actually divided into 2 zoning districts, but staff told us to include the entire lot irrespective of the zoning district change. So that's just the size of the lot.
That answers my question. Thank you.
And aren't the hiking trails that are back there part of the civic amenity and whatever?
Yes, it's a unique amenity. I mean, it's Centennial Woods. It's
Yeah, right.
69 acres. It's
Okay, number 5, we need an updated map and calculations of the habitat block layer.
I downloaded that, sorry. It has been added to the plan. I've recalculated it. You haven't seen it, but
Okay.
I have done the work.
Perfect, okay, good.
Yeah.
And if for any reason the staff has any questions or problems, we'll be reviewing this again in the future, so.
Thank you.
The next two questions are about deliberative session issues. Let me read them. Review the staff report as presented without closing the hearing, including listening to the applicant's argument pertaining to the applicability of 24 VSA for Section 4413, schedule deliberations to discuss the applicant's argument, and resume the hearing at a future date. Let me continue. Ask the applicant to specifically enumerate what they mean by primary use and determine in deliberative sessions the applicability of 24 VSA Section 4413. What are your thoughts about that?
So I'm Andy McElwain. I'm the outside counsel for UVM. And I'm here to address section 4413, give an overview and explain its application. Rather than sort of answer that specific question, it might be more helpful if I kind of give the board a sense of the overview, and also respond to some of the comments about its application to this project. I do want to preface my comments by saying that my intention is just to give information to the board tonight. Obviously, the board needs to consult with city attorneys about the legal issues surrounding the statute. And my comments certainly are not meant to be critical in any way of the LDR. The university understands the important goals of the LDR and shares in the city's desire to protect the important environmental and ecological resources with respect to the property. But it is important to balance this with the requirements and the purposes of this statute. And we can certainly have direct conversations with the city attorneys about these issues. And in fact, going back to 2021 when the LDRs was being amended, we were pretty involved in those discussions, providing research and analysis about this particular statute and its implications. But as Vermont courts have analyzed this statute, 4413 identifies the land uses that are entitled to limited regulation and specifically lists which aspects of a proposed project can be regulated and to what extent. So regarding the types of land uses that are entitled to limited regulation, the qualifying uses include, among other things, educational institutions that have been certified by the Department of Education. So UVM meets that criteria. It's a little more nuanced than that, though, and I'd point out that there are also so-called component uses and within a university, and they're also covered by the statute. So, for example, the environmental court decided a case a few years ago with respect to a permit application involving Goddard College. And in that case, I believe Goddard was seeking a permit to build a wood chip heating plant and building to serve the school. And that permit was challenged, but under section 4413, the court held that while this wood chip heating facility wasn't akin to a classroom or a library, its overall use was for school purposes, and so it was considered covered by section 4413, and therefore regulation of that particular use was limited and restricted.
Excuse me, do you have a cite for the case? And
Sure.
The name of the case?
In Ray Goddard College conditional use, docket number is 175-1211. And I don't know if the DRB has access to Westlaw, but I can give you that site if it's useful.
It would be useful to me, yeah.
Okay.
2013
Yeah,
WL
yeah.
5677442. And it's a decision by Judge Walsh. And I can actually forward copies of these decisions to the DRB afterwards if it'd be helpful.
They would, thank you.
Sure. So here, the proposed use is for student housing. And I think it's important to, here's a place where I think I can address the direct question that's been posed with respect to the meaning of primary use. So primary use is not a term of art that's actually used in the statute. It's one that's been developed by the courts. Sort of the courts have filled this standard in. With respect to Vermont case law, the courts haven't specifically addressed primary use in the context of 4413, but they have used that standard when reviewing property tax exemption cases. And basically, because that context is analogous to 4413, it's logical that the courts would also use that standard here. Outside of Vermont, Massachusetts has a law that's very similar to 4413. And the reason that I cite to Massachusetts is because, again, Vermont courts haven't specifically addressed this primary use standard in the context of 4413 itself. But Massachusetts has a very similar law, which also restricts or limits regulation of certain types of uses. And in Massachusetts, the courts have employed a primary use test. And the reason that's important is because in this situation, student housing is an educational use. Courts have found it to be an educational use in the property tax context. And it doesn't have to be, student housing doesn't have to be, or the housing doesn't have to be exclusively filled by university students in order to meet that test. So there can be a situation where you don't have all units occupied by University of Vermont students, but as long as it's primarily occupied and promoting the overarching educational goal, it satisfies the test. So how does the statute limit the regulation of a qualifying use? And it really does it in two ways. The first part of the statute, which is 4413 subparagraph A1, sets out a list of aspects that may be regulated with respect to a qualifying use. And the courts have referred to that as the statutory list. And I don't know if the DRB has reviewed the statute previously and read the contents of the statutory list, but they basically include specific enumerated aspects involving location, size, height, building, bulk, yards, courts, setbacks, density of buildings, off-street parking, loading facilities, traffic, noise, lighting, landscaping, and screening requirements.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's pertinent. Could you help us with your view of the meaning of density, the use of the term density in the statute as it pertains to this project?
Well,
does it pertain? What does density of buildings mean if it doesn't reach to density of units, shall we say? That's I don't want to be cute. That's where I'm going. Why does density of buildings not encompass density of units? Living units.
I'm not sure if I fully understand.
Well, how do you understand the term density of buildings?
I mean, densities describes a lot of different things, but basically it's the sort of, it describes what's buildable in a particular footprint. Probably not the best way to describe it, but does that answer your question?
No.
Well, I'm not sure I understand why you're asking me about density.
Well, I need a little help from staff. I understand there's a density limit on living units in this area,
That's correct.
and what is the density limit?
It depends, it's based on the total buildable area of the lot.
Oh.
And the buildable area of the lot is defined as the area, or the area of the master plan or lot or whatever we're talking about, is defined as the area of the parcel minus hazards, level 1 resources, rights of way, and utility transmission easements.
So is the lot the entire outlined red area?
In this case, it would be. And so the subject matter here is whether the hazards and the level 1 resources are allowed to be regulated under 4413. If they are, then they are removed from the allowable calculation of density. If the city is not allowed to regulate hazards and level 1 resources, then the applicant, the university, has the ability to use the density from those areas in a more consolidated way in the development portion of the lot.
So what is so construing our regulation as broadly as possible, what is the maximum number of living units that would be permitted in this? Set aside the statute we're talking about for a moment that weren't at issue. What would be the maximum number of living units? Construing all the contingencies in favor of the developer.
Oh, in favor of the developer, they would have more than enough. If it were construed such that the city was allowed to regulate hazards and level 1 resources, which includes habitat blocks and very steep slopes, then they do not have enough density.
How short are they?
But what's the number? Do you have a number?
Well, so we don't, because there was some question about that we didn't know the area that, there were some areas that were up in the air. Was that a number that you had recalculated? Right. I think my memory is that it was less than you're proposing by, 10% or so, maybe 15% or so. If the things that they would like to not be stripped from the allowable density were stripped from the allowable density.
Okay, so that's really where the argument is, what can be stripped from the allowable density.
Yes.
And
Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but that was such a critical question in my mind, but please continue.
if I can just ask,
Marty, do you mind, or Marla, do you mind pulling up, do you have the latest that we have? The DP 1.0 shows colorized wetlands, very steep slopes outside of wetlands. Thank you. And that kind of shows without including the habitat block, which the habitat block, it doesn't show up unless you zoom in, but it's a lot of area in there.
so if I understand, the development itself is not occurring within a habitat block or any restricted development area. The argument for 24 VSA 4413 is to include habitat block area for essentially transfer of development right into the development?
Mostly, yes.
Okay.
The one subtlety is it seems, and well, this is much later, this I think is in the preliminary plat staff report. There are some areas of very steep slopes that appear to be within the development area. And so that's a different, I think, way of looking at 4413 because it is a specific direct impact as opposed to a density transfer impact.
Marla, we had talked before, and the university seemed hesitant about a conservation PUD. Were that the vehicle, would they have the density that they need to do what they want to do?
Yes.
Okay, and with the proposal as it's set forward now, does it protect the balance of that property from future development?
For the duration of the master plan, as we discussed under comment.
But
number-
afterward, that would give them the ability under 4413 to potentially develop other areas
Yes.
of the woods, okay?
I
But
guess
they need approval.
I guess.
Which they're arguing they would almost get. It would be de facto because the law says they can do it and therefore they would do it. So there is a matter of potentially having more development there than we might necessarily be comfortable with the existing LDRs.
Wait a minute. It's for us to determine, rightly or wrongly, what is incorporated within the development area. I don't think there's any overriding existing state law to tell us that, is there? It's a matter of construction of our regulation, is it not?
So there's two terms being used and they are not the same. Development area is what the applicant has defined as the area they want to develop. Buildable area is what we have defined as the area they are allowed to develop. And those are different things.
Is that a subset of the first one?
No. They could have come in with a proposal and said, we think 4413 exempts us from regulation of habitat blocks, and we're going to put something up at the top of the page. They didn't choose to put a development area there, but if 4413 exempts them from regulation of habitat blocks, they could. If it does not, then that area under our LDR, throwing away 4413 for a moment, would not be buildable, and you would have to deny any proposal for development.
Lonnie, go ahead.
I just want to note that UVM has a conserved natural area in a large part of that area. Where the steep slopes are, where the habitat blocks are, is already conserved with the Vermont Land Trust.
So everybody understand what's going on?
Wouldn't want to be quizzed on it, but, you know, it's complex.
I go back to my original question, I guess, which is fundamental. Do you see density of buildings as meaning something different and excluding density of living units?
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer your question directly. I think I'm answering a question that's posed by the staff comment, which is to the extent the city has the ability to regulate this qualifying use with respect to density, density would not include consideration of habitat block or river corridor, level 1 and level 2 resources. Is that what you're getting at?
No, I'm asking something just much simpler, which is, does density of buildings mean something different than, and does it exclude, density of living units?
That question might be directed to somebody else within the team who's better able to respond.
It's a legal question.
Well, fair enough, and I'm here to talk about 4413, and I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm not sure I know
But
why you're.
Density of buildings is the term used in 4413, right?
It is, correct.
So what does it mean to you?
That it's common usage with respect to how AMPs regulate buildings for density. I mean, it can mean various things.
Number of living units in a given area, correct?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. That answers my question.
Okay, fair enough. I apologize. I was trying to address the staff comment, and I thought that that's what you were asking me about.
I was asking a question that jumps at me directly from the statute.
Fair enough. So I think that we talked about the statutory list. Those are the specifically enumerated criteria. The courts have said those are the criteria that can permissibly be regulated, but outside of that list, no. And I can give you examples of at least one other court case where that's been decided. But there's also an additional layer of limitation that the legislature has imposed. And even if a municipality can regulate a use according to the statutory list, so density of a building, it can only do so to the extent that it doesn't
have the effect of interfering with the intended functional use. So with respect to staff comment, I'm not sure, is this number 6? Is this page 9? Okay.
Yes, 6 and 7.
There was a question, I think, in there that had to do with the purposes of the regulation, and it describing the purposes of the regulation are to regulate location of development and to protect wildlife habitat. It may be the case that the habitat blocks are permitted to be regulated as a locational standard. And it's an important question to ask. However, the environmental court, with respect to the term location, which is part of the statutory list, has made clear that location refers to the general location of the project within a municipality. It's not referring to various components within the project. So here the location of this project is obviously not the issue. It's regulating for location within the project, which is prohibited by the statute. There was also a reference to a purpose of the statute being to protect wildlife habitat, and there was a citation to a portion of the statute in the comments, which is actually found in a later subparagraph, which is D14. And D14 is separate from subparagraph A1 in the statutory criteria. It deals with different practices and operations. And so we have to be careful not to conflate the two. Subparagraph D14 provides municipalities with limited authority to regulate practices that are identified as agricultural, silvicultural, and also forestry operations. But that has no application to the university's project here. In fact, this issue about whether an appropriate municipal panel can consider impacts, specifically adverse impacts on wildlife, was addressed in a case involving the town of Charlotte a few years back. And I can give you the citation for that one too if you'd like it now, or send it later. But in that case, the town, ZBA, had issued a conditional use permit for the construction of a network of hiking trails on town-owned land. The permit was challenged, and one of the challenges was that the ZBA had failed to take into consideration adverse impacts on wildlife and agriculture. And the environmental court had the opportunity to review 4413 and held that, in fact, those considerations are not part of the statutory list. So the town had no obligation to consider those factors. And because they're not part of the statutory list, they're really not something that the DRB can consider either when it's reviewing this project. So again, habitat block, wildlife considerations, they're nowhere mentioned in the statutory list. And the Vermont Supreme Court has strictly construed that provision of the statute and held that municipalities can only regulate the uses that are enumerated in there. There was another comment, I'm not sure if it was a recent comment or an older comment, that had to do with river corridor designation. We had submitted a letter a while back which lays some of this out in more detail, but I just wanted to note that this project is not going to be constructed in the river corridor. So there's no authority for regulating the project based on river corridor designation. But all of these considerations are still, again, subject to that second layer of limitation that I described earlier, which is that even if there is some ground for regulating an aspect of the qualifying use, it can only do so if it does not interfere with the intended functional use of the project. So here, the intended functional use of the project is student housing for the university. And regulations that would interfere with that use, either by reducing the number of units owned, or if there may be other considerations at play as well. The statute prohibits the DRB from regulating the use.
Can we explore that a little bit more?
Sure.
I think the phrase is interfere with the functional use, right?
Intended functional use, correct.
Intended functional use. So it's your contention that, excuse me, what was the original number of units and what have you increased them to?
Right now, 192. 192?
No,
Previously-
the master, this is, okay, so hang on, sorry. I just want to make sure that we're being clear. We keep saying project, this is a conversation about the master plan, so it's got to be all of it. So when they said 10% less, that's based on the master plan application, not the specific project. So I just want to be clear about that, so.
You're building student housing. What I'm asking is how many units are you proposing to build? And you indicated it was an increase from a previous number.
Yeah, so
Those numbers was.
So we had 184 for Phase 1, and I believe 91 for Phase 2. So now that went up to 192 and 91, so that's 283.
Just talk about Phase 1 to make my point. So are you suggesting that if we said, no, you can't go to 192, let's assume for the sake of discussion only, as a hypothetical, that we find we can regulate the number of units. Would it be your contention that saying, no, you can't have an 192, you can only have 184, would interfere with the intentional functional use of the facility?
The answer is yes, I would, but.
How about 191?
Yes, I would, but that said, the university, without waiver of any of its rights under Section 4413, would certainly have discussion with the DRB and with the city attorney to discuss these issues with the goal of determining an appropriate resolution of that question, because obviously that question would have to be decided by a judge.
I understand your desire to preserve your legal position, and I respect it, okay? I also appreciate your tact and how you approached it. But it's obvious, it's patently absurd to say, demanding the reduction of the number of units from 192 to 191 or 184 or 173 interferes with the intended functional use. I don't think passes the sniff test.
If I could just respond, it's fair to ask these hypothetical questions. Ultimately, I'm not the one who makes the decision. I can only tell you what the statute says, how the courts have generally applied.
Has the court specifically addressed this issue, number of units?
Not to my knowledge, but.
Mine neither.
Fair enough, but what I can tell you is that, again, and not to get into a civics lesson about separation of powers, but the authority that this panel has is derived from the state. And ultimately, municipal acts, including municipal zoning, are going to be construed strictly and resolved against the municipality when there's fair and reasonable doubt about how you interpret the statute. That's the city's burden in a court situation. So I'm just giving you standards that have been applied when trying to interpret and construe the language of this statute, because you are correct. This particular issue hasn't been decided by a Vermont court, let alone the Vermont Supreme Court.
So for our purposes, we're the first decider of the meaning of intended functional use as it applies to number of units of student housing, correct?
I would believe so.
Okay. Now, next question. Hang on just. Well, I'm
No,
sorry,
wait, go
John,
ahead,
if you
Frank,
want to
keep
say
going.
something. All right. You want me to keep going? All right.
I would.
In the case, I understand that student housing is reasonably an educational use, right? Typically, take a boarding school or anything like that, right? Typically, the university owns, or the school owns the housing, they operate the housing, and it's completely occupied by students. And that kind of student housing, there's no argument. I was interested in what you said earlier when you said it doesn't have to be all occupied by students. Well, what percentage are we, are you saying that it will not be fully occupied by students in this case? Is that true?
No, it primarily will be, more than 50%.
So is that written where? In the operating agreement for the LLC?
It will be. So it will specifically say that
So it could be 49% purely commercial housing, correct?
Is that 50% by unit numbers, 50% by bedroom, 50% by leases issued? Lots of ways we can cut that. You could end up with a very small number of students and still be 50% of leases signed.
So we can work with you on that. But our position, I'm John Collins, Deputy General Counsel.
Well, you're the ones who are drafting the LLC. What's it going to say?
So it depends on where we end up here. What I was going to suggest, I didn't want to interrupt because this is a great conversation, but I wrote to Colin McNeil this morning and suggested that we meet, Andy, he and I meet. We've spent a lot of time with him on this 4413 issue earlier on the LDR, and I don't want to cut off it's an important issue, but it seems that he's going to advise you, it may make more sense for us to meet with Colin, have that discussion, and then he can advise you.
I don't know if it certainly makes sense. I don't know that it makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an important distinction to be
Anybody
drawn.
bored by the current discussion?
I think there's an important distinction to be drawn between the city's attorney and the DRB's attorney, and there is a bit of a sort of a imaginary Berlin Wall in that role. So I'm not sure that the city attorney in their role as the DRB's attorney can have a direct conversation. And I say that, again, genuinely, I'm not sure, but I have been sort of warned to make sure that this conversation, the board's making the decision, the board can consult with the board's attorney on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't mean to.
They're not representing the position of the city of South Burlington. They're providing advice for the board to make a decision on.
Understand that.
We can think about it and figure out what's appropriate, but we just don't want to cross any lines.
Yeah, because as a layperson listening to this, a couple of things that jump out at me is I have absolutely, if you were building a dorm, if UVM was building a dorm, I think all this goes away. But this is a private enterprise between you and an outside investor. They're the majority shareholders. It's outside the normal university-owned channels. You're talking about maybe 50% is going to be market rate. To me,
only 49%.
50 or 50 minus 1. And again, how's that defined? To me, again, as a layperson, it starts to smell like this is a way to try and enrich a outside for-profit group using the educational shielding of UVM. And that's my concern with this. And that's what we need to make sure through our attorney that we're comfortable with. Because I don't think any of us have a problem with dorm space. It's if we're mixing that project, how much is educational? If 50% of this then becomes market rate, is it educational? That power plant you mentioned, if 51% of that energy was going off-site and being sold to the grid, well, is it still educational use for that one facility, or now has it become a commercial enterprise? And I think it's an open question.
Let's talk about a related, now case that appears related to me, at least. You can distinguish it. I'm sure you can distinguish it. But I know you must know Middlebury Bowl, right? It's a tax case?
Yeah, that's an older case, but it's been a while since I've read it, but yes.
All right. Broadly, I believe the holding is Middlebury's has a ski area called Middlebury Bowl. It was open to the public, certainly used by lots of students, but the court in a tax case, which you cited as precedent, said it was not an educational use. Now, we're awfully close to the line here, and I would not say the developer is somehow doing something, you make it sound almost shady. I don't think that's fair. The developer's using the university to make money. I'd put it actually just as much the other way around. The university is using the developer to make a little money in addition to providing some student housing, which I don't condemn. The question is it permissible here?
Well, you are correct that I can distinguish that case. I mean, this isn't a ski bowl, this is student housing, and the Vermont Supreme Court has explicitly said student housing is an educational purpose. I understand the concern about how much of the housing will be UVM students versus commercial, but the primary use test, which has been used in the tax exemption cases, was developed for the very purpose that there are going to be situations where there won't be exclusive use. For example, where a building is housed completely by students. There may be other incidental uses, but that doesn't defeat the primary use. And that's the test that the law cares about.
Is it possible if I could jump in for a second? Would that be okay? I think one of the interesting distinctions here, and I want to respond to your comments specifically. There is a couple different things going on. Number one, we have a 60-year land lease for the development of Catamount Woods, which is obviously not it's part of the master plan, but that's specifically what we're talking about. As part of that, there is a 60-year agreement between AAM Catamount Woods LLC, which is the public-private partnership, and the University of Vermont. For the first 20 years, they are guaranteeing the number of students in the building exceeds 98% of the available beds. We, in other jurisdictions, and this is, if you look in other jurisdictions, it's become very common that private enterprises assist universities in providing student housing. When we're talking about the 51%, we're talking about it post year 20 to year 60, so for that 40-year period of time. And I believe what John is saying is that for the period of time post year 20, we would be willing to certify to the board exactly how many students are living in the building annually. We would provide certification. We do this in other jurisdictions so that the board could be comfortable that the majority of beds, which is probably the correct way to count it, okay, based on the lease count, is being used by students. Now, in deference to the university, we would always market to University of Vermont students first, but that wouldn't preclude us filling the building with students from other universities as long as they were full-time students. And it would still meet the test in theory. But we would be absolutely open to a condition that we are meeting a 51% test in years 21 through 60 of that. So I just wanted to make that very clear because we've kind of switched from the master plan to a very specific conversation about this one building. And I just wanted to clarify that because that's the position.
So if we were to say, I'm sorry, Dawn.
So may I just, I'm confused. I'm glad I'm not a lawyer because I get a little lost here.
Honestly, so am I, because listening to them, I was glazing over.
But the 98% versus the 50%, is the 50% 20 years out? And
Yes.
it's because of demographic changes?
No, the 50%, the 51% is based upon where we'll be 20 years from now because of limitations to get the best possible interest rate. So, because the whole point in this is for us to provide low-cost housing to the students or make it as cheap as possible. Well, how are we going to do that? We've got to be able to show that we've got a guaranteed revenue trail because that's going to lower any type of credit risk. So the university doing that is dramatically dropping the interest rate paid by the entity, which in turn passes that cost off to the students. So that's the reasoning for the 20-year number, because that would match the debt.
I hope you mean passes the savings off to the student.
Yes, passes in the savings. I apologize for misspeaking.
And just to add to that, we want the housing to be affordable. It's juniors and seniors are not required to live there. So we have to make it attractive. You know, on campus, we have first and second years who are required to live there, but this is a different scenario, so.
Okay,
So-
so getting back to functional use for just a minute, now, it's all hypothetical, all right? This might all be fine, okay, maybe. But just testing the limits a little bit. Let's say, if we said, well, and again, talking about, well, the statute, right? If we said, well, geez, you know, maybe you could do with well, of course, you've answered the question. Maybe you can do with 150 and take them all off of the commercial side. So, you know, have 150 units, and 120 of them are for students, and you could have 30 commercial. Would that interfere with the function?
If the university was agreeable to that, it's not my concern.
It actually would create a problem, and here's why. So it would create a problem because if there were a commercial enterprise in there, we would then have to have 20% of those units then be affordable units under city ordinance. So this determination actually matters as it relates to the determination of affordable units. Now, it would be our intention and our position, AAMs and the universities, that all of our units are theoretically affordable because they are all going to be significantly under market rate, because we're going to be passing along every bit of savings we can to the students.
But there's a definition.
But there is a definition. But that's why the determination matters. You can't just say, well, take it off the commercial.
So I'm hearing, and I've looked through the materials you submitted today, or yesterday or whatever. I didn't see what I think the board is maybe asking for. A number of units that would be permitted if habitat blocks were regulated. I see the number if they were not. Is that correct? The board wants to see both of those numbers? Yeah.
And is it possible that the UVM folks can get those to you so we can use those in our deliberative session? About,
Oh, yeah.
because that's what, I lost my thing.
But I think that, Marla, that's important to note, that it's separate, the master plan
Right.
application is separate from the plot application because it's phase one.
Right.
All of those units would work. It's the impact is on phase two from a master plan perspective.
Are there any other significant issues that are impacted by your reading versus ours of 4413?
Well,
Or is it-
as was alluded to, the steep slopes have a locational, unless that changed upon review of that comment, there are some steep slopes that are physically impacted. Those are a hazard, and so if 4413 is applicable, there's no problem with their proposed physical impacts. And then the inclusionary housing, and I think that was it?
The civic space.
Right, of course.
Right.
Yeah, so the civic space is based on the 10% of the buildable area. Buildable area being what we say they can build on. So if the buildable area is much larger, it actually works. It's sort of the opposite, right? They have to have a much larger civic space if they are allowed to build on habitat blocks.
So my question is, number 6 and 7 refer to our need to discuss this in deliberative session. So given the discussion that we've had, are we ready to move beyond?
I have a
Okay, Mark, go ahead.
I'm not going to belabor the point because I defer to Frank when it comes to the legal discussions on the board. I kind of defer to, I guess, the zoning regulations and how it impacts projects when I look at these things. So if I understand the issue from a DRB quasi-judicial, like standpoint, you're asking us to go into deliberative to get opinion to whether we accept the 4413 as it applies to this property. And if it does apply to this property, the habitat blocks are taken off as restrictions that allow for higher density for your development. Is there anything else in the regulations, because I read the second sentence of A1, only to the extent that regulations do not have the effect of interfering with the intended functional use. Are there any other zoning regulations in effect on this lot that are affected by the reading of 4413, like setbacks, density, or height, bulk, lot coverage?
So height, lot coverage, that kind of stuff, no. But when you do consider the civic spaces, then there's a question of whether you can consider the entire space or you have to only consider 50 feet on each side of the path.
Okay.
That's one question. The other question is the steep slopes question. We do have answers for that, but that might involve 4413 also.
Okay.
Because we have the parking lot, but we also have to comply with fire department regulations. And so the fire lane has to be a certain distance from the building, and then that's why it impedes on the steep slopes.
Okay.
So there's those issues also.
Okay.
And in the preliminary plat, there's a few issues like that that we figure will be based on our answers to the master plan
Okay.
application.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions about 6 and 7 in preparation for us having a deliberative session?
Just a request, would you please, I won't ask you to string cite for me, would you please send the cases that you think support primary use, and then they can be out of jurisdiction, it's okay. I'd like to have a better understanding of what courts have said about primary use.
And,
Education is a primary use.
sure, and does the DRB have the letter that we submitted in March? I think it was March 15th. I'll submit that letter again, and I'll also send you the 2 environmental court decisions I referenced, the Charlotte decision, the Goddard College decision, and if there's anything else.
You had a Massachusetts case that discussed primary use?
Yes, it's cited in the letter. The statute and the case I referenced are cited in the letter that I previously submitted, but I can resend.
Okay, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. And do you want any of the tax exemption cases that I was referring to by analogy?
Well, actually, the tax exemption cases, you can, but they don't particularly help you. I mean, you know, if you want to apply, tax exemptions are narrowly construed. So I don't know if that helps you because we're not constrained by the same kind of narrow construction that the court is in construing a tax statute.
Well, it's still a primary use standard. That's the same standard that's used by the Massachusetts
If you
courts
think,
interpreting the
if
same
you
law.
think it's helpful, by all means, I promise to read.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, we did not get your name. I know it's probably on the sheet out back, but what is your name, please?
That's okay. It's Andy McElwain.
Thank you. Okay. It is 8:30, and it's time for us to move on. We've spent more than an hour on this master plan application, and I think this is a good stopping point. Let's take a 3-minute break and resume to take up your next project.
Thank
We want feedback on tonight. How about that?
I think that the reality was that we weren't going to get through both, and I think if we could actually complete one or get one part of it, for the most part, complete, and then get continued on the other, because it's the same subject matter, so many of the thoughts and comments overlap, it may make sense, but I leave that up to the DRB's call.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Let's keep at it. We're only on 6 and 7, and I think there are 36, so let's take a 5-minute bio break, and we'll reconvene. See you here in 5 minutes.
Would you roll that down for me to the left?
Yeah, sure. Oh, good for you. Okay. Moving right along with glacial speed beyond.
I'm just happy that it's as clear as mud, all these projects.
Okay, let's go to number 8. The board should require the applicant to be more specific as to what it means to be a plant substitution that does not affect the project. Substitutions of plants of the same size in the same genus is always permitted by right? Obviously, we're talking about landscaping?
Yep.
Modifications of standards, things
That's
that
right,
can be
okay, thank
changed without, things that can be changed without amendments, right? Yeah.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff Hodson, Wagner Hodson, Landscape Architecture. Yeah, we didn't realize that. That's all we were asking for, was being able to substitute plant species, because it's happening a lot right now with all the development going on, that we can't always get what we want.
Okay. I think the Rolling Stones had a song about that, didn't they? All right, number 9. This is complicated, and I'm going to ask Marla to explain this. The sentence I underlined, staff recommends the board ask the applicant to clarify in which direction they expect to locate landscaping budget.
Let me just preface it by saying, so the hotel addition and the garage are in the T4 form-based code district, and they have much smaller budgets, and so we're able to satisfy the landscape requirements for those two projects with all that the T4 allows you to count. The Catamount Woods is a much bigger budget, a tighter site, and it's not in form-based code, so we only have plant material to use towards satisfying the landscape requirement. It would be great if we could also use the things that are included in the T4, but I understand that's not, I don't know, Marla, that's not something the board can allow?
Sure. Actually, it's up to the board. So maybe not all of you remember this, there was a lot of discussion about landscaping and trees and shrubs. Trees and shrubs, only trees and shrubs. Well, maybe grasses. Well, then another 6 months later, maybe benches, maybe sculptures. So the LDR allows the applicant to count trees and shrubs towards their required minimum landscaping budget by right. The board may allow other things on site. I believe what you're asking is to both allow other things on site and to allow some of that required expenditure to occur on the adjoining form-based code sites.
Possibly. The flexibility would be great, yeah.
So up to 10% on the form-based code sites, and the non-trees and shrubs on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, so just as an example, the zoning line cuts right through the traffic rotary where we were proposing sculpture and some upgrades to pavement, but it means that only half the rotary can have it counted towards that. And the other half is in the R12 district, so things like that. So.
What are your thoughts, board?
I mean, personally, I'm comfortable with moving landscaping around as long as it's for the relatively the same project, and it generally enhances the whole the project as a whole. So I'm amenable to it, but I'd like to see it,
Yep. So on the screen, you can see the traffic rotary, and you can see that line that cuts it into like 1/3, 2/3. Luckily, the sculpture in the center is in the T4 district, so that counts. But the pavement for the rest of the rotary that's in the R12, we couldn't use an upgraded decorative pavement to satisfy the landscape.
So Marty's showing where that line is between this master plan and the form-based code project. And it extends all the way to the edge of the page.
So if there was some ability to either count those things that are allowed in the T4 in the Catamount Woods lot.
Marla, excuse me, but I may be thinking about the wrong thing, but don't we have some ability to move district lines in some circumstances?
Yes, I think we explored that with this team, and it affected many, many, many things.
Yeah.
And it's not in their favor to do
No,
that.
yeah, it wasn't.
Marla, that's correct.
So I guess my opinion is that we want a project that looks unified and well planned out, and this creates somewhat of an artificial requirement to divide. It makes no sense to me. So I'm in favor of granting flexibility.
And just so that the board is aware, that's the reason why Jeff and Cynthia, who are landscape architects, are working on both projects, so that it is a cohesive, unified plan throughout what most people would believe is a one parcel of land. So we're trying to make, and there's additional comments coming up, but we want it to look as though it's one person did the whole thing.
Yeah, and I'd also say that, we as a board, we have the discretion to approve non-growy things as part of your landscape budget, but not at the sacrifice of a properly landscaped parcel. If it's properly landscaped and you still have additional funds, then we typically will say, okay, yes, you can put some decorative paver, some landscape walls, some artwork, so.
Yeah, we're still, our budget is based on the building budget, and they're still fine tuning that for Catamount Woods, but it looks like there's gonna be 200,000 to 300,000 that we can't spend in plant material, so.
Growy things, which is the
I know
civil
what you
engineering term, I believe.
It's a technical term.
Okay. Okay. So, I'm sorry, did we just do? Number 9. We did 9, okay, good, thank you. Number 10. Staff notes the applicant has included inconsistent designations throughout the project. We need clarity about each described area.
I wasn't sure if this was civil plans, landscape plans, or both. I wasn't sure what was
Let's see
referring.
what it says.
So this is about the area proposed subdivision, what's being developed, what's not being developed, what are the limits of the site amenities, what are the limits of the conservation areas. I think that Derek and I had a bit of a chat about this moments before the packet went to publication, so I'm hopeful that he has nailed it in the revised materials.
Yeah, I hope so. We do have the context plan that I wasn't sure if you had the context plan at the time of doing this.
Yeah, it's at the last page of the plans one.
And we were trying to highlight.
No, I lied, it's not.
Trying to highlight all the amenities, that might be but it's the orthophoto plan that shows not that one. Yep, there you go. So our goal, as we understood it, was to show everything, meeting the context. I think that's a little bit dated because there should be some blue shaded site amenities for the courtyards added to the plan. But that was what we were understanding needed to be added to the plan to meet, showing everything. We have a greenway that's green along the edge of the road, which is a 10-foot wide multi-use path. We have a proposed wooded area above that. The Centennial Woods is all surrounding. We showed the bus routes, Patchen Road, sort of the big picture, and we're hoping that told the story. But if not, certainly we can talk more.
I think we have an updated version of this that we sent yesterday.
Are we good, or do you want to see it?
And Marla, we could talk too if it's just clarifying some things.
Sounds like we're good.
I think this is a staff issue.
Yeah.
They need this clarification, continuity, and coordination, so.
Right, the
Okay.
point here is that there needs to be a plan against which future applications can be compared.
Yep.
Great, great.
Okay. Number 11, we need a clear map. Staff recommends the board direct the applicant to provide a clear, dedicated map for demonstrating how the master plan area interacts with these adjoining spaces.
And that's sort of rolls with the last
Okay,
comment.
so it's done.
We hope so.
Okay.
But we'll continue to talk. If
We'll let you know if it is. All right, number 12. We need to know more about pedestrian connections to Centennial Woods.
So this is where the connection of Centennial Woods and also going up to Williston Road crosses parcels. So the connection to Centennial Woods, do you have the map, or did you send that yesterday, Lonnie?
We sent 11 maps yesterday, but I want to say about this one, we do have a connection to Centennial Woods. It is just over the boundary in Burlington. So it's very close by, it's very accessible to people, but we do have this boundary. So we're in a situation that the regulations don't really apply, because if you go up Centennial Woods Way towards East Avenue, you can see a little break in the vegetation. Yeah, go up. Yeah, right there. So that is the entrance to the woods, and it's within easy walking distance of the people. Now, of the people who will be living in Catamount Woods. Now, the university is willing to explore to see if we can put another trailhead in South Burlington. But again, that's a function of this boundary, which really won't make a difference to the daily life of the residents.
Is there a sidewalk that connects up to that trailhead?
There should be. Yeah, there is.
So I think that this gets into the civic space stuff, which I think is a little bit farther along, but since it's mentioned now, you can see that the green area on the top of the page is one of the civic spaces that they're proposing, and the area of that civic space, I believe, is calculated without habitat blocks, correct? So that's the larger area that you would possibly, depending on the board's determination.
Correct.
Okay, so this may be one of the 10% of the buildable area that they're required to provide, that they're setting aside. That pedestrian connection into Centennial Woods as a whole isn't what they're designating as their civic space. They could, I suppose, designate the whole thing. But they're saying this is the portion of it that we're counting towards our required civic space. So it might be, it's a little strange. I guess if it's civic space, it has to remain as a civic space type. It can't be developed in the future. So if they wanted to reserve the right to develop other portions of Centennial Woods, they wouldn't want to say all of Centennial Woods is their civic space. So there may need to be a connection to the actual civic space rather than to the general Centennial Woods area.
So the other thing is, you see that black line? That's a conserved, this line, that's a conserved area. Much of Centennial Woods, I think 69 acres in Burlington and South Burlington, is conserved with the Vermont Land Trust. So this is, again, where the boundary between Burlington and South Burlington becomes a little bit arbitrary for the purposes of this project. Sure. So, we could designate more area that is conserved, and that would be fine. It's already conserved. That again shows sort of a mismatch between the regulations and what's actually there. We have a unique amenity there that we don't want to carve up too much, because we want to comply with regulations that don't really take this parcel into account.
I have a question. When I have hiked and walked through the woods, you go way back and there's a parking lot way out back. What will happen to that parking lot?
That parking lot is an existing parking lot which will not be affected by this project.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Who's it serving?
It was pretty full. I was amazed the other day.
I think we lease it out to the medical center.
Okay, that would make sense, yeah.
But it's had other uses within the university at different times. So
Okay.
it's just university property.
Thank you. Number
So, this is just about Centennial Woods. Okay, great. And then the next one is about, as you mentioned, Tony, the connection to Williston Road.
So, moving on to 13, this is regarding public transit. The applicant's narrative description omits any discussion of public transit and how it will be accommodated by the site. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to include a review of public transit and accommodate pedestrian areas to it in the connections on the proposed master plan site.
So this is where it gets a little tricky, because the master plan does not include areas owned by AM Burlington Hotel, which is the Doubletree Hotel. There will be sidewalks that take students or any pedestrians all the way up to the Williston Road, where there is currently Green Mountain Transit bus stop, and I know we're going to talk about the traffic study in a little bit. So that would be how pedestrians would get to mass transit, as well as the building itself of Catamount Woods will be serviced by CAT Trans, which is the UVM internal shuttle service.
So I think this comes up a couple times. The road, improvements of the road, access to Williston Road. The board kind of has two options here. As Tony said, it's not part of the master plan. Can you go to a sheet that shows the master plan limits? Doesn't really matter which one. But let me put it in a different example, a much simpler example. There's a landlocked parcel and someone wants to develop it. You can't develop a parcel without access, right? So you would say, well, sorry, you don't own the land, but you're going to have to get an easement and build a road on the land to get to your project. Otherwise, we're not going to allow you to build the project. The board could say this project must include that. Because we know that they are pursuing several projects at once, I think the board has a second option here, and that is to condition this approval on the other approval moving forward in some way. And I think that it may be important to decide that, whether this project needs to include those improvements or whether it's just conditioned on a separate project. But that's going to be something that comes up several times.
Do you want us to discuss that now?
Marla, would it be easier if speaking on behalf of the hotel, okay, because I get to speak on behalf of the hotel as well. We are more than willing to have a meeting with Green Mountain Transit, VTrans, DRB, well, obviously we're meeting with the DRB, but staff, DPW for South Burlington. Obviously this, because of its proximity and that light at Williston Road is actually controlled by the city of Burlington, so they would be included in that conversation to have a larger conversation about the connection of the proposed roadway to Williston Road. One of the comments has already been, hey, we need to actually, change an address, which is we have to change the hotel's address, which we said we were fine to. Many of these improvements would actually take place on the hotel parcel. Which is noted throughout this document later on. It wouldn't actually take place on UVM land. We are more than happy to participate in that and have that be a conditional approval here, because if we had to via easement and for whatever reason the hotel and the garage didn't happen, which it really, all three kind of have to happen together because otherwise it doesn't really work, we would be absolutely fine with doing that, as well as I would be okay if the DRB wanted to impose that condition on the hotel expansion, which is form-based code and not before the DRB, but I would be okay with that if we had to do that. So Marla, I don't know if that helps you.
So the applicant would prefer a condition tying the two projects together, as opposed to making this project include the road improvements. If the board's okay with that, we can just proceed that way.
So,
What happens in that case is that means it's my authority to review the road improvements, not the board's, because the road improvements happen in the form-based code. Okay.
right.
I
but
trust
if-
you.
Is there any, I don't mean to raise something silly, I just don't know the answer. Is there any material risk that the hotel project won't happen?
Well, do you want to explain why the garage is important?
So the hotel project has to happen for two reasons. First of all, the hotel expansion is replacing 58 rooms that were built in the mid-50s with modern rooms. The rooms that were built in the mid-50s just don't work anymore. And because we're giving up approximately 450 parking spaces on the back parcel to create Catamount Woods, we have to create structured parking to be able to accommodate all the guests of the hotel on the same parcel. So all three projects really happen together. If Catamount Woods in some strange way never happened, then theoretically we wouldn't have to build the structured parking, but we would still have to do the hotel expansion because we're required to by Hilton. So there's legal documents that actually requires us to do that with Hilton.
I don't think there's any reason to tie the hotel expansion to the road, but I'm comfortable drafting in condition that ties the phase one of Catamount Woods to the parking garage, and the parking garage project includes improvements to the roadway and improvements to pedestrian access.
Would you have a problem with sort of a fail-safe backup condition in the permit for this project that required an easement in the event?
I'd have to think that through because that was a very general comment, but I don't think so.
Okay. And I don't know that it's necessary, I just,
And I know we're not reviewing the hotel expansion, but am I correct that the new part of the hotel will be a separate building?
Kind of. It's as clear as mud. It is a separate building, but it is connected via a sky bridge,
Okay.
which will actually be a freestanding bridge that connects it into the third floor of the existing hotel. You can see it on your screen right there, the hand.
Oh,
and
sure.
we're obviously building in the build-to zones and making everybody happy, and so, and.
Similar to Green Mountain Suites on Dorset.
Excuse me?
Similar to Green Mountain Suites on Dorset.
With actual doors,
With what?
with actual doors,
With actual doors?
as opposed to just a face of windows. It's nice.
Oh, okay.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying
no,
nice.
we're super excited about this building. We've actually moved along on form-based code quite a bit already. We will be in front of the DRB for one particular question, but outside of that, we're moving along pretty fast here on that project.
Okay. Number 13, public transit, I think we did that already. Number 14, we need A&R's determination about the river corridor.
Well, so the river corridor is not mapped on the state website. It is mapped on South Burlington's regulations. I reached out to the floodplains manager for the area, thought we were set and that they could take the map off, but it is apparently deemed a perennial stream according to the definition. So we went to the River Management Division to ask for a waiver, their opinion on it, and the River Management engineer told us that, basically sent an email saying that the technical definition is a perennial stream. We could spend time trying to get it, it would need a little more study. So, but he basically proceeded to say that because this reach of the stream has been and must continue to be maintained as a functioning stormwater treatment practice, requiring maintenance and pre-existing use as a stormwater facility precludes the ability to manage the reach as natural and in recognition of these types of pre-existing conditions in urban areas. The stream alteration general permit allows these types of existing facilities to be maintained as non-reporting. I think there's probably some more back and forth that's needed, but they're basically viewing it, and if you see where the line comes on our plan, it goes right through our stormwater ponds. So stormwater ponds have been designed, regulated, approved. We also feel that the river corridor 1207A has six purposes of the regulation, and we feel that we have a argument for each case that the area is already developed, that it's used for stormwater. We're not increasing impacts. There is a new 10-foot wide multi-use path that will be going through there that's not there today. But there's an existing path that does go through there with a bridge that nobody can use. So we're basically replacing that and feel that we meet the zoning regulations for river management, river corridor impacts. So hopefully that.
What is a perennial river or stream? What was the term?
Perennial stream, yeah.
I mean, I know what perennial means, I'm a gardener, but what does a perennial stream mean?
Basically, water flows throughout the year. And in our case, it's not. It's stormwater that's leading to it. So it's all watershed based, so it's still flowing, but it's fed by almost exclusively storm pipes leading either to UVM's East Campus Pond, the Main Street Pond, that 1998 when they built the Main Street improvements, they built that pond. So a bunch of improvements that sort of intercepted. It's the head of the waterway, and now it's stormwater ponds. A river corridor is intended to protect the erosion, I guess I'll say, of the meandering stream. There is no meandering stream anymore. So my argument is, while it's mapped on the regulations, it's in the LDRs, it doesn't really meet the definition of what a river corridor is intended to do. So we feel that we are not negatively impacting the river corridor for the project.
So will you continue to have this discussion with A&R?
Yes.
Or is it done?
We can.
I think if I could summarize, I think what Derek is saying is that they think that without going to A&R, there is a path forward under the regulations as drafted, under the LDR.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, there are allowed, there are things that can be allowed in the River Corridor Overlay District. We feel that we're not adversely affecting anything. We feel that the purpose outlined, there's 6 items that we feel we meet, and we can provide those responses if that helps.
Okay. Why don't you plan on doing that for the continued hearing?
Sounds good.
Can I ask a quick question? So currently, right, on the data, South Burlington data map viewer, whatever, right? It does show it, right, but doesn't match the A&R on online atlas, right?
Correct, yeah.
But on the data viewer, it shows that there's an overflow pipe that goes to a ditch line that goes to the South Burlington A&R river corridor, right? It looks like the building is proposed within that ditch line. Is the intended expansion of that stormwater pond to the gravel wetland to get water back to that valley or whatever that river corridor designator is going to be?
Eventually. So there's a lot of conversations still happening.
Of the system, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
There's a chance, and there's a lot of players in this conversation, but there's a pipe that currently bypasses everything, goes underneath 2 ponds. We could intercept that pipe, expand that pond, which is what we're phase 1A is. So we're manipulating storm systems, moving water to provide better treatment, to provide water quality treatment, channel protection treatment for the flow restoration plan for Centennial Brook. So it's all intended to be positive. So yes, some of the storm pipes may get eliminated. So. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions about this issue? No? Okay. Let's move on to 15. This is regarding geothermal heating. Where is it planned for?
Yep, so the vast majority, 90+%, will be on UVM land. If we bring up the just where the plot lines are, you can see the parking lot in the middle right. That is predominantly on UVM land, if we were to zoom in there. This will be approximately 155 wells. They have to be spaced approximately 9 feet apart, and they will go underneath that parking lot. There is the reality that due to spacing and the final calculations of this are still being done, that some of those wells may exist on the hotel parcel. And if any wells are on the hotel parcel, they will be part of the permanent easement plan between the two. And we've got, a myriad of easements going back and forth. But the idea here is to provide on-site renewable energy to the Catamount Woods building.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What about phase 2? Geothermal, not geothermal?
We don't have that planned yet.
Okay, so for the purposes of the master plan, right now, the plan is to have geothermal only in that area. Okay.
Yes.
So one of the designations required in the master plan, if you've seen the staff report, is to designate any land area to be set aside for renewable energy production. I think that there's probably some room in there if it's doing two things. I think that this standard was specifically contemplating land that was used only for renewable energy production, but if you're looking at, putting it under the courtyard in the other housing, probably isn't going to require an amendment.
We would like to double dip, yes. We would like to use land in two ways at once for that. It's an urban area. We don't want to spread things out that much.
Questions from the board? Okay.
Just curious, the sizing of the system, is that expected to cover 100% of the power for the building or some fraction thereof?
100%. We're sizing it to do 100%.
Nice. Good.
Hence the 155 wells.
Okay. 16 is regarding solar installation requirements.
Yep, so where geothermal is a on-site renewable energy, solar would not be required under either city ordinance or the June 2024 power regulations because on-site renewable is already on the parcel.
Okay.
So
Question?
that's where we get into phase 2 as well, right? So solar would be required for phase 2, but like I said, I think that that's something that can change when you get to phase 2 if you find that you want to do it with geothermal.
Yeah, I think phase 2, once they determine, they would have to meet the qualifications of the renewable energy requirement for that building.
How's the geothermal going to work? Let me explain what I'm asking. I was in Iceland, and I was delighted that the house we rented, they're 100% geothermal, that had warm floors. Do you intend that your housing is going to be constructed such that it will have warm floors, or will you just be sending the heat into a conventional radiating system?
It's a conventional radiated system. There are no warmed floors. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to buy UVM fuzzy socks for everybody, so, with their lease. But no, we won't be doing that. It'll be a conventional system.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
We don't want to make those students too soft. All right. How will the building, number 17, how do you expect the building designs will be complementary to each other?
Well, the good news here is that we are smack dab in the middle of the university, a hotel, a structured parking garage, and the medical center. So they all kind of fit. We're dealing with very large buildings. I mean, I was looking it up earlier on something else I was doing today, and the hotel is 250,000 square feet. So we're going to have two buildings sitting next to each other that are roughly the same size. And they are being designed to complement each other. So from an outer skin perspective, from look and feel, this is one of the reasons why we're utilizing a single landscape architect, is so that the whole area looks cohesive. And that's our goal here. So I think that answers the question, but from a look and feel perspective, that's what we're attempting to do.
Okay, thanks. Questions?
There's no renderings provided, like we've done a master plan before and they provide renderings so we could tell what they look like to other buildings that have been previously built, right? So we don't have that
Haven't seen any.
to
No.
include as like what do we call them?
We've provided out the elevations and some renderings, but we would be more than happy to provide something additional if the board would like for when we continue the hearing.
Yeah, so this is stuff you wouldn't know, but the board reviewed a master plan, or a master plan, I guess, not really a master plan technically, but either way. They were asking for some pre-approvals for certain things that were outside of the LDRs. They were asking for height waiver. And the board said, well, if we're going to grant you a height waiver, these things better really fit in with the adjoining things. If I don't believe that this team is asking for waivers at this point that would require at the master plan level that would necessitate those renderings. However, several of the staff comments in the preliminary plat do recommend renderings. And I'm sure it's on your list.
Yep, it's on our list, and we're more than happy to provide them.
Great. Other questions? Go ahead, Lonnie.
We'd like to prepare that for the final plans, if possible.
Okay.
The final plat.
Okay. Number 18. This is about the bus stop. I won't read it. You've read it. What do you have to say?
No. No. The simple answer is that we wanted to, before we started meetings with DPW and with the mass transit, we wanted to hear DRB's direct comments and not just staff comments. We obviously saw staff comments when we saw DPW's comments. And there is a big question as to which, there's an existing bus stop at the corner between Williston Road and the current driveway that services the hotel, which turns into Centennial Woods Way, which, if the state agrees, will all be known as Centennial Woods Way. So that bus stop exists today, and it's used by a lot of our employees. So I like where it sits because my employees don't then have to cross streets. Right. However, it is in the traffic study that they do think that it should flop to the other side of that roadway, as well as other changes there. We're more than happy to agree that whatever the outcome of that group discussion is, we will institute, even though it is on a parcel that is not under discussion here.
You will institute?
If in conversation with Mass Transit, DPW, because this is on the hotel parcel, it's not part of this master plan discussion. Right. But because we are a party to Catamount Woods, I am agreeing that we will do what the consensus is that they've asked of us if they want us to move the bus stop, because it's not going to be in the right of way. It's going to be on our actual land. So we'd be giving land to the city.
Mm-hmm. So this is again the driveway on the landlocked parcel, right? If the board feels that having the bus stop moved is an important part of this housing project being a success, it's within the board's authority to say you must do an off-site improvement. I don't know I think that's exactly what Tony's saying. What does the board think? Is that important enough to include in this project, or is it better to leave it up to what Green Mountain Transit thinks is best?
What do you expect is the rationale for moving it across the street?
Based on the traffic study and conversations, as well as based on conversations with the Bike and Ped Committee for the city of South Burlington, I think that there was a lot of safety concerns because they also wanted an individual cycle for pedestrian traffic across Williston Road. And so the theory is that if you moved it to the other side of the roadway, it would link better and be a bit safer. Now, as to whether or not Green Mountain Transit agrees with that statement, that's up to them. Okay. But we're more than happy to participate and have that be a condition.
Just a question. There's a crosswalk here, right?
That is correct. There's an existing crosswalk there.
And so putting the bus stop here, if you were going to Staples, you have to cross twice? Or are they proposing another crosswalk?
They're proposing a new crosswalk. So you would, if you were going to the Staples Plaza and we were to move it, you would cross Williston Road once, and then you would have to cross the driveway. It's also important to note that by moving that crosswalk, when you go to the the new bike ped bridge, you would have to cross that driveway. But most people are going to be doing that anyway, to be perfectly honest. There's going to be a lot more bike and foot traffic right there. So that's just a reality of that bridge going in, because that's where it empties out. But you are correct, you would cross that driveway or that curb cut.
So either way, if you're getting from one side to the other, you have to cross the street and then a driveway. It's just whether it's the Staples driveway or Catamount
Correct. And
Woods Way or whatever.
putting on my selfish hat for a second, I'm obviously worried about everybody, but I also have a heightened awareness of my employees who use the bus system quite frequently. We have a lot of them that take mass transit to work, and so I'm obviously concerned about their safety. But again, we're willing to go based on the recommendation of the combined group.
But we've sort of dealt with it by possibly conditional use in the hotel to have that path be built in the future, right? We talked about the connection between the master plan area, right? The Catamount Woods area, having a pedestrian path along the roadway to the bus stop, right? By having a bus stop somewhere else for this master plan, I don't think changes anything, as long as that gets built, right?
So just in response to that, so there's two questions being asked. So this conversation is specific to where the bus stop sits, and that would also entail putting in bike racking and other items that would be requested as part of that. There is still a greenway. Either way, there would be a greenway that would connect Catamount Woods all the way to Williston Road, and actually for the vast majority of what is now the driveway, but we hope to be Centennial Woods Way, there's actually a sidewalk on both sides of the road until you get to right there. That's the crosswalk that crosses Centennial Woods Way, and that is being put in there to preserve how that parking lot on the lower end of the screen is used. And creating some safety networks in there. So we had them crossing further away from the lighting system.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a pedestrian connection to the bus stop, even if it's on the other side of the driveway. So it doesn't, I don't see what we're having an issue here with.
Okay.
I have maybe it's not appropriate here, maybe it's addressed later. A more general question. I'm thinking about 550 juniors and seniors. Basically, that's what we're talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
Basically, crossing Williston Road every day to get to school. Right?
No,
Well, so they would be serviced by the CatTrans system, by bike share programs, by their own bikes, e-bikes, ride share, and for those that choose to walk, yes, they would be they wouldn't necessarily be crossing Williston Road because it kind of depends on where they're going, but they would certainly be crossing over East Ave and,
All right.
however they choose to get to East Ave, which could be cutting through the rugby fields or anything
So
else.
it's not a forced column of 550 students marching across the road.
That would be correct.
I got it. Thank you.
There's also, we also did a transportation impact study that was submitted to staff a while ago, and that documents how many students or how many residents will cross Williston Road, and how many will cross on East Avenue, that kind of thing. So it predicts the additional demand, and these are not large numbers.
Right, so right now, the section of this staff report is looking at the recommendations of that traffic study that you just referenced. And so some of the recommendations include the relocating the transit stop.
Because those students, if they were crossing Williston Road, Frank, would be going to either Verizon or the photo store or Staples or West Marine or any of the stores that are, not to classes, which they need to go west to go to classes.
Right, they would be crossing there to go to the bike ped bridge.
All right. 19, we need a updated traffic study, please.
So we have the traffic study, and we completely plan to coordinate that with GMT and the South Burlington Department of Public Works. And as Tony just said, we're going to take their recommendations.
Questions, anyone?
At this point, would we implement, it's been a while since I've asked, the traffic study
Technical review?
technical review?
Invoke.
Invoke.
Technical review.
So far, we're feeling like our in-house expertise is adequate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But if at any point you feel you need it, you would need us to invoke it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me ask then. So we've got all these stakeholders in this decision, and when they all get together and they want contrary things, who decides what finally gets done?
You do.
So it's going to come back to us for final, whatever the recommendations are going to come back. Okay. That's what I want to make sure, because I will be shocked if everybody thinks the same way.
Even when we invoke technical review, it does come back to us to accept them, and we can not accept them.
Such power.
Yes.
It occurred to me, I was just thinking about students crossing the road, but really, let's say, okay, 20 years and a day out, we got potentially 250 cars shuffling in and out every day.
I can answer. So we do have a certain number of parking spaces. That's not going to change. So we have, I don't know if it's 86 or 91 parking spaces on the lot. And then we're asking for more to be shared in the garage. But we won't, this will always, what I want to say is this will always be an area that will depend on public transit. Walking, biking, and public transit, as well as vehicles. It's not out in the country where every single resident, no matter who it is going to need a vehicle.
In other words, the parking is not going to accommodate a space for every unit.
That is correct. We're asking for a waiver, and in the agreement between AAM and the university, any spaces up to the 151 that we've asked for, and that gets us to the waived amount, would be accommodated in the structured parking garage under a license which would last the length of the land lease. So as long as there's a building there.
And those details are in the preliminary plat application.
Okay. Let's move on to 20. I'm going to admit I did not understand this, so I'm going to read it. Staff considers the existing pattern of development, presence of the interstate to the east of the site, and presence of various natural resources to the north make meeting the block length and perimeter unfeasible. Staff recommends that the board determine whether they agree with staff that the proposed 950-foot block length is acceptable. I'm confused, unfeasible, and then acceptable. As so, what dots am I not connecting?
Could we possibly see a diagram, or is there a map that would illustrate the problem?
Yeah. Yeah, that one's great. But we need to go all the way up to the dogleg in Catamount Woods Way, yeah, perfect. So the LDR says that block length should not exceed 500 feet, average block length. You zoomed in too far. Show the whole thing from Williston Road. to
And
Catamount
what is
Woods Way.
block length?
How far from intersection to intersection?
Oh, okay, all right.
Excluding driveways, yes?
Excluding driveways, so roads.
Okay,
So from Williston Road on the bottom to the existing segment of Catamount Woods Way is about 950 feet.
okay.
For there to be additional road, so in a flat green field, they would have to put another road in the middle of that. The argument here is that the setting, giant storm pond on the left, interstate on the right,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Catamount whatever it is, Catamount Woods on the north, Centennial Woods on the north, there's not really a place for another road. But staff wanted the board to sort of affirm that that was,
And we have
Got it.
discretion to waive that.
yes.
Yeah, well, it's sort of obvious that we should.
Everyone okay with that? Thank you for that explanation.
And we agree with this condition also.
21, staff recommends the board require the applicant to work with staff and the Director of Public Works to develop a solution that addresses the requirement that driveways be located more than 200 feet from a significant intersection, signalized intersection prior to closing the hearing. There may be some city knowledge that could be helpful to addressing this issue.
We understood this to be in the phase 2, and we showed it too close. So we've updated the plans to push it further away so that it meets the 200-foot requirement.
Oh, I want to see.
Yeah, it should be in the packets that you have if you have the.
I won't
newest-
waste the board's time, but
Okay,
I want
that's
to see.
fine. But there's an electrical transformer, and we just have to be shy of that electrical transformer.
But you're okay with the pond? Sorry, I'm
Yes.
wasting the board's time.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you're right. Yes, barely, but yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
We thought there was going to be a problem with the pond.
Yeah, I was at first too, but
Okay,
far so good.
great.
All right, number 22, staff recommends the board require the applicant to revise their plans and summary tables to reflect the buildable area, which excludes rights-of-way and the transmission mains. This is discussed in greater detail in association with civic spaces below.
I'm sorry. We have revised the summary table, but after staff comments, so we'll continue to work with staff on that.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from the board? No. All right, 22, we need total gross floor area.
And that'll be included. Yep.
I think we have that in table 2401, which we gave staff yesterday, so it's up there. And we did do that, and staff just hasn't had time to even
Okay.
look at that.
Number 24, this is regarding the right-of-way. Staff recommends the board direct the applicant to provide a clear table of areas of rights-of-way and easements within the master plan area, regardless of the board's determination on whether habitat blocks are applicable under 24 VSA 4413.
The word there is clear. We will work with staff to make sure it's clear. Yes, it's a complicated calculation.
25, we need some clarity about exclusivity or primarily for students. I think we had this conversation earlier, but I'm wondering what you might want to add to this.
I want to add absolutely nothing to the conversation earlier because I don't want to go back down that rabbit hole.
Okay.
I want to keep us moving.
Okay, is everyone okay with that? All right. 26, staff recommends the board require the applicant to estimate a wastewater system demand for Phase 2.
We'll add that to that same table.
Okay. 27, is that correct? Yeah. 27. This is regarding the DPW comments. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to evaluate whether the comments will affect the master plan configuration, including land use allocations or phase limits.
No, we're comfortable with it. I know there was some confusion in one of the watersheds in the calculation and whether or not the pond was big enough, but it's just, it was missing a label and we're good. We're
Good.
fine.
Okay. Number 28, this is regarding parallel parking on one side. I won't read it. You've read it. Tell us what you think.
Well, the problem with the parallel parking on one side of that roadway is it inhibits the tractor trailers as well as the buses who are turning in and out and creating some safety concerns. So we're asking for a waiver of the parallel parking.
And can we waive that?
Yeah, would you like to understand talk about, I don't know, it sounds like more delving is needed, but that's just my opinion.
So, anyone have any questions about this?
I guess I'm just wondering, can we see on the plan where we're talking about this and where we're looking to not have it?
Yeah, a lot of projects will do like, the spaces where they can and not spaces where they can't.
One of the struggles here is this is an extremely, not to upset Frank, but this is a dense site. There's a lot going on in a very small area. We've got pedestrians, we've got tractor trailers that are servicing the hotel, as well as then we're adding in cat transit, which is going to be going through all these lots. They've got to be able to safely make those turns. And I think we would be fine with looking to see where we can add that, but we also want to create those barriers and create that safety. And that is obviously a primary concern for all of us. So we're happy to continue to look at it, but overarching, the parallel parking on that roadway is going to make that roadway extremely tight. And you can't really widen that roadway much more because you have the storm water to the left and you have structure to the right. So there's not a lot of space to widen that. The other problem you have is it's a pretty windy road to begin with, which we like because it keeps travel speeds down. In fact, one of the things that I had asked Marla originally is, can I put in speed bumps? She's like, no, you can't do that. I said, okay, but I like the windy aspect of it because it'll keep that travel speed down.
Well, one of the best ways to keep travel speeds down is to keep the lanes narrow. So if you have parking on one side, that'll help. I would be very interested to see it diagrammed out because you've got some long straight runs there. So you shouldn't have turning radii interfering with parking. So if you can have somebody take a look and just map out where parallel parking would fit and where you'd want to exclude it so you have a sufficient turning radius for tractor trailers and buses.
We
And
don't.
then we can at least see what we're talking about waiving.
Yeah, we don't. We have done that. We've done that that analysis with the transportation impact study. Right now, we like the curve. Parking would also kind of hide the main entrance to the building, which is right there on the road on Centennial Woods Way, with the plaza and everything. So it just wouldn't work. That's the nature of this road. We have enough off-site parking. We don't have enough width right now to let buses go by, to have students be able to see where they're going, which is why we're asking for the waiver. And that includes, I'm not going to speak for the hotel, but I know the area that's going to be for Catamount Woods cannot accommodate parking on one side.
Well, I'm kind of with John. Why don't we,
Yeah, why don't we provide the specific sketch that you're looking
for
for
example,
so that you can see it?
You could have a sketch that excludes parking in front of the entrance to the building. Or if there's a driveway, you could have a certain distance from the edge of the driveway, et cetera. In other words, something a little more finely calculated.
Also, just to clarify, are we just talking about the area in front of the building, or is this, because this is going to be a new dedicated road all the way down to Williston, correct?
Right, so we're talking about, for the purposes of this conversation, the master plan area only.
Okay.
Right, so, and this is what you guys decide, this is the implication of what you were thinking about earlier. If you say this project must include off-site improvements from the limit, can you put the mouse where the limit of the project, where the limit of the master plan is on the road? Right, so above that line is board's jurisdiction. Below that line, if you say it's a condition of approval that you have to do off-site improvements, it's still your jurisdiction. If you say it's condition of approval that this project can't move forward without the adjacent garage, it's not your jurisdiction, it's my jurisdiction. And, staff always intends to defer to the board, but I don't have as much flexibility as you guys.
Okay. I don't want to belabor this, but why can't we allow speed bumps?
Because they are a retrofit, not a design feature.
I see. Thank you.
So where are we leaving this issue of the parallel parking?
It sounds like I've heard from 3 board members that they'd like to see a diagram.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Would that diagram be only of the master plan area or of the entire area?
Well,
I
is
think
there
it'd
any
be powerful
reason
to show the whole area if it's not too much extra work.
It's not a question of work, it's a question of, I have competing interests here. I mean, for the hotel, if we had to put in parallel parking spaces, you're pushing, I would be losing a fair amount of space along that roadway, which changes how that plays into the number of spaces in the garage. So it plays into the size of the garage and the cost of the garage, as well as how it plays into, because if you put parallel parking spaces, I've got to widen the road. And if I widen the road, that's going to push back where the storefront is on the garage. So that has a impact.
So the comment here is getting to exactly your point, which is that the right-of-way width in our standards includes parallel parking already. So it shouldn't require widening of the right-of-way in any way to fit it in.
So what it would cause, in the one area that you could possibly put it is in front of the garage. But we would be eliminating trees that are pretty critical on this design. It's 7 feet wide. Yes, it's 7 feet wide. We would need at least the 9. So that's where Tony's saying, if the road has been narrowed, right now it's 30 feet. We're narrowing it down to the 20. That's the urban collector street typology.
Bicycle Boulevard.
Thank you. I was like, there's a lot of words in there. We would have to basically impact the rest of the garage to gain the extra 2 feet. There's really, as you can see, the grading near the ponds is already inching its way down to the pond. So we're trying not to narrow the green belt because that was a staff comment from form-based code. So we're sensitive to that. So the only area to add parking is getting closer to the garage, and that would eliminate the nice street tree look just to add parking for a couple spaces. And I personally just don't think it provides a big benefit, but that's, I think the tree look has a better feel than that's just my 2 cents, so.
Oops.
I guess I'm just still a little confused because the road type selected, doesn't that mandate whether it should have the parking on it? Because I thought the road type defined the width and what it was supposed to have.
Yes,
So is this road type supposed to have the parking on one side or not?
yes, it is.
So it's that road type but narrowed is,
The lane widths are 10 feet. So we have a 20-foot wide road right now.
Travel way, you mean?
Travel way, 10 and 10, so the 20-foot. I thought that was not a requirement on the bicycle connector, which is why that's why we did it this way, sorry. Yeah.
I certainly could be wrong. I'm relatively new at this, but I thought this came up because the road type required it and it was being omitted.
Yes.
So it seems like it's either the road is misspecified or the road type should allow sufficient width where it should be able to be put in with everything else.
Right.
Yeah,
So
we
I'm
had-
just confused.
We had a long discussion, both with staff and internally, about what kind of road should we choose. We have an existing situation, so we're basically trying to fit the definition to an existing situation. And it's difficult. Maybe we choose a different type, I don't know. But we have an existing situation that we know we want bikes on the road. We have a bike path. We have constraints. We have the garage on one side. We have the stormwater pond on the other side. So this seemed to be the closest fit with a waiver. Like we'd have to find a waiver for something else if we chose a different kind.
Okay, so just to clarify, so the road as specified has bike lanes basically in lieu of parking. Did I hear that right? Or is the bike on the rec path?
The rec path, that's where the
Okay.
bike is, yes. Yep, so we have 20-foot wide lane. 7-foot green belt to the rec path, and on the other side, we have a 7-foot green belt to the 5-foot sidewalk.
So it's a 20-foot cartway,
Yes.
and the 20-foot cartway in that specified road, is that supposed to fit parking? Seems like that'd be tight. Or is that not to the spec for the road type they've selected?
Right, so the road spec is on the left here. It needs a 5-foot sidewalk on one side, a 10-foot rec path on the other. They've done that. It needs a 6-foot green belt. They've done that. It needs, we're going to skip parallel parking for now. It needs two-way traffic on 2 lanes with a 6 to 10-foot travel way. The right-of-way has to be 60 feet wide and it's a vertical curb, 25 feet, 25 mile per hour design speed. In addition to the 2 9 to 10-foot travel lanes, it needs to have parallel parking on one side. So the board can waive this, but I understand the question to be, why do you need the waiver? Why doesn't it all fit?
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, if there's a 60-foot right-of-way, is there a 60-foot right-of-way? So how can that possibly, if you're meeting the spec of a 60-foot right-of-way, how can it possibly require you to move the garage back if you simply add a parking lane? You're within the 60-foot right-of-way.
No, we can fit it. It tucks the wall back. It tucks sort of that space in front of the garage, which is
Is there a
tight.
version of this plan that shows the edge of the right-of-way? Because it's not shown
Just
on
barely
this.
shows, but you have to look very close.
Frank, to answer your question, what it does is it removes a lot of the landscaping and it pushes it extremely close to the front of that building. And we felt, in our opinion, that because this was in the form-based code, this section, okay, that we felt as though it was better without parallel parking there. If that is what the board wants, then we're gonna have to go back and figure it out, because right now it's not there.
Where is a 60-foot right-of-way?
Go to SP 1.0. It shows the hatching and stuff.
Okay,
There you go.
so you really,
So the right-of-way goes through the staircase at the northwest corner of the garage. So that's the edge of the right-of-way. So yes, we could pinch things to stay inside and do what you're asking. We're not-
how can you legitimately have the right-of-way going through the staircase?
They're gonna have to get a maintenance
You're not
agreement.
complying with the right-of-way requirement.
So DPW has a standard agreement for maintenance agreement for private elements within the public right-of-way.
Oh, so it's allowed, DPW lets it?
Well, there's comments on it later.
So basically, the cartway is shown here narrower than it typically would be for this street type.
Not
So this has the
necessarily.
10-foot lanes, right? That's 20 feet wide.
But it's also supposed to
But
have
then they don't
parking.
have the additional 8.
Right, so the cartway, curb to curb,
Yeah, yeah.
is narrower than it typically would be.
Yes.
So
Except
And it's
what's
to
being
provide more
discussed here
green
is in
space.
form-based code, not part of this master plan.
Well, that's the board's decision to make, still.
And there is
Well, that
something to
would-
be said for having
whoa.
some consistency if it's one new road.
Well, but hang on, that would be changing the zoning for the hotel.
No, it would be a condition to require off-site improvements. This is what we keep talking about. It's either, the board's gonna either say, the condition is off-site improvements to construct this road are required as part of phase 1 of this project, or phase 1 of this project is dependent on approval of the garage project.
Yes, but, okay. Respectfully, that creates major consternation for the hotel, because we are already cutting back our total number of parking spaces. This is the largest continuous hotel convention space in the state of Vermont. Having the availability of proper amounts of parking for all the conventions that we host for and bring people into this area is critical. If we have to move that garage and lose a lane of spaces, times that by 4, you're talking 60-plus spaces. That has a dramatic impact.
Well, wait a minute. I thought what you'd be losing, you don't have to lose garage, you lose landscaping, right?
Well, Not necessarily, because as a requirement of being structured parking, and this again gets into the form-based code, the first 25 feet of the structured parking of the first floor has to be office space, which we are doing. So it just pushes everything back, because it all has to work.
Okay, beyond that though, to the north of the division between the form-based code and the master plan, you're not proposing beyond 20-foot widths there, are you? Right, the curb to curb is still only 20 feet.
No,
Because you don't want to change the overall width of the lane from going from south to north.
it's not possible to have two buses pass at a 10-foot
Right.
wide lane in there, but it's a three-way stop. So that shouldn't be discounted.
So it would be easy to show, right, on a travel or road plan, the radius for the bus turn, and then the entrance to the building would exclude any additional parking within 85% of this lane north of that division line.
Yeah, do you want me to show a bus turning movement to show that? Is that what you're asking? Sorry.
It sounds like that's what people are looking for, right? I know you can in AutoCAD do that, right?
Sure, yes, I can give you a bus. I mean, I've done it, so I know that it's, yeah, okay, there you go.
And you're never going to have two buses passing on the way to Williston Road? Because I thought you just said you can't get two buses past each other on the road as proposed next to the parking garage.
They stay just in their lane. I shouldn't say they don't, sorry. Yes, they stay just in their lane. That's why that's why I expanded it. In 10 feet, they can't pass. In 12 feet, they can. That's why it's shown as 12.
Okay.
Up above. Yep.
So where are we with this? And are we speaking of cutting back on landscaping along the side of the garage?
I think what we're saying is for us to approve the waiver north of the demarcation of the master plan, you should submit a document showing that you can't include parallel parking because of access vehicles and buses turning into the private drives and the entrance to the building. That would be easy for us then to be able to approve that waiver for that portion of the road. The rest of it, that's a.
Okay.
I'm not gonna touch that.
All right. It's 9:47. I think we should bring this to a close. We have minutes to approve and any other business.
Well, public comment and continuing the next application and minutes, and then
Yes, so thank you for public comment. I always forget that, even though I know it's important. So are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Any online?
there are a few people online. I'm not seeing any raised hands or unmuting or anything. So I think you're good on public comment.
Okay.
Well, the entire public's on the payroll.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to continue this hearing at a date. Do we have a date, Marla?
The earliest we can see them again is, oh boy, my calendar's not working, June 4th. They would need to get us revised materials 2 weeks before that date. And it seems like there's a lot of stuff that we need to do some back and forth on. Is that too soon for you guys?
I was going to say it's not soon enough.
Okay.
If there's any way, I mean, the reality is, and I know that there's a lot of projects going on in South Burlington, and I certainly respect that. But the reality is that we have a hard, fast date to create student housing for the university that has a move-in date of August 2026. We've got to move, if we're going to hit that date, we've got to move relatively quickly. So if there is any way to move this up then versus a month out, we would like that.
Can I make a comment, though? You know, for our reality, right, is I reviewed these staff comments over the weekend, and most of the things that you submitted was yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, we could have skipped through some of these staff comments, I think, sooner if we could get material sooner as well, right? I understand the dates and stuff, but I'm having a hard time over here when we get to a comment and we submitted something yesterday, right?
Well, don't forget, we didn't get the final version of staff comments till last Wednesday. So we did move relatively quickly to try to address every comment.
But, you know, it's good.
So is there what is the likelihood of an earlier date in May?
The only way to do it is to have a special meeting. You're booked for your next meeting already. And I am not available.
And are we gonna have a deliberative session between then and now to talk to the attorney?
So the deliberative session would occur likely on the night that you would continue them, or maybe the intervening, maybe on the 21st, when you have your regularly scheduled meeting.
Right.
But
we do
the-
have
the-
other things we have to deliberate on as well
Right.
in between. So.
Right.
So it sounds like, unfortunately, there's no option but June 4th.
Take what I could get.
Can we continue both applications, or do we have to do them separately?
Well, you haven't opened the other one yet.
Okay.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to continue master plan application MP 2401 to June 4th, 2024.
So moved?
Thank you. John? Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried.
Same thing with the companion project.
Okay, would you like to make a motion to continue do we have to open it first to continue?
How about you just say the application number?
SD 2406. Continue that to June 4th.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good. Thank you. We will see you in a few weeks. All right, the minutes of the April 16th meeting.
And I have to say, I didn't have time to review them myself. I had someone else review them. So if there are any corrections, no offense taken.
I did review them, and it made sense to me. I'll go ahead and move that we adopt the minutes of April 16th.
Second?
Thank you, John. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Any other business?
Quinn is not here for the next meeting on May 21st. Anyone else aware of a conflict?
Conflict, what's on the meeting? Not that I ever have a conflict, so, no. Yeah.
Oh, do it. Your mic's off.
We have the Munson lot. They're going to do an outdoor storage for.
Oh,
There's the conditional use for 11 White Place, but that application has 11 White Place. But I believe that application has been withdrawn. We have to touch base on that, but you're on vacation. And do you have the other stuff? Because I don't remember it. I thought I have 2 of the 4.
All right. White Place, 2-lot subdivision on Highland Terrace of Eric Sample,
I
Munson.
think we're out of space on Highland Terrace.
This is the same one you heard, it expired.
Okay.
And then City of South Burlington for a 2.1 million gallon water storage tank on Dorset Street next to the existing water storage tank. Okay, not hearing any major conflicts for the 21st. Great, thank you very much.
Good. All right, the meeting is over. Thank you for your patience, everyone, and have a wonderful time.